There are two kinds of quiet kids in every family. The ones who are quiet because they have nothing to say, and the ones who are quiet because they have been watching, storing, and waiting. Most parents never figure out which one they raised. Not until it is too late. My name is Riley Callahan. I turned 18 on a Thursday morning in April, and by 9:15 that same morning, my stepfather was sliding a legal document across the breakfast table like it was a birthday card, and my mother was smiling the smile she saved for church and photo ops. They had no idea I had spent the last 5 months building something they could never touch. But before I take you into that kitchen, hit like and subscribe right now. It genuinely helps more than you know. Drop your city and time in the comments. I read every single one. Let me take you back to October. 6 months before that breakfast table. 6 months before everything fell apart for the people who thought they had already won. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of afternoon where the sky turns gray by 4 and the house feels smaller than it is. I was in my room, going through the old storage shelf in my closet, the one I never touched, when I found a shoebox my grandfather had mailed me the summer before he passed. He had told me to put it somewhere safe and not open it unless something felt wrong at home. I had done exactly that. Shoved it behind a stack of old yearbooks and forgotten about it. My grandfather, Raymond Callahan, died 14 months before that October afternoon. He had been a quiet, steady man who spent 40 years running a small but profitable commercial real estate business in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He taught me how to play chess. He taught me how to read a contract, and apparently, he had also spent the last year of his life planning for a possibility he never said out loud. Inside the box was a handwritten letter, a folded piece of paper with a phone number, and a note on the outside of an envelope in his handwriting that said, "Open this. If your mother starts talking about your future before you turn 18 and it does not feel right." I sat on the floor of my closet for a long time. My grandfather had been dead for over a year. And somehow he had known. From downstairs, I could hear my mother on the phone, her voice low and clipped the way it got when she was talking business she did not want me to hear. My stepfather, Dale Pruitt, had come home early that night. He was a commercial contractor, big guy, loud personality, always smelling like sawdust and convenience store coffee. He and my mother had gotten married 2 years after my dad died. He had a son named Cody from his first marriage who was a year younger than me and had moved into the bedroom down the hall. I put the letter back in the box. I put the box back behind the yearbooks. And I went downstairs and poured myself a glass of water like nothing had happened. That night I lay in bed and thought about the last 3 weeks. My mother had used the phrase "closer to your birthday" 4 times that I could count. It did not sound like party planning. It sounded like a deadline. My dad, Thomas Callahan, died when I was 11. He was a good man who drove a blue pickup and never missed a single one of my school events. He died in a highway accident on a November morning when I was in 5th grade and the school counselor pulled me out of class, and the look on her face told me before she said a single word. My mother cried for a week and a half. Then she started redecorating the living room. She remarried Dale Pruitt when I was 13. I learned 3 things fast. 1, my mother did not allow grief. She called emotions dramatic. If I cried, she would sigh and walk out to the back porch with her glass of wine. 2, she did not allow happiness either, not the loud kind. If I laughed too big, she would give me that look and say, "Riley, settle down." 3, the only acceptable setting in that house was flat and invisible. So that is exactly what I became. By the time I was 12, I had stopped showing my feelings around her. I saved them for Grandpa Raymond's kitchen table and the long drives we took on Sundays out past the county line when he would let me pick the radio station and we would just talk. He never shushed me. He never told me I was too much. He died in September 2 years ago. Heart failure, 74 years old. At the funeral, my mother wore black and cried at exactly the right volume. Dale stood in the corner checking his phone. The will was read 3 weeks later. There was a trust. My name was on it. The number made Dale's jaw go loose. My grandfather had left me a little over $700,000 in blue-chip stocks, liquid assets, and the proceeds from 2 commercial lots he had sold in Chester County the year before he died. The terms were simple. The assets were mine. I could not touch the principal until my 18th birthday. On that date, full legal ownership transferred. The trustee named in the paperwork was an attorney named Gerald Whitmore out of Lancaster. My mother read the trust documents with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not grief. It was not pride. It was math. 6 months before my birthday, a man in a charcoal suit started appearing at our house on Wednesday afternoons. He drove a silver Audi. He always carried a leather portfolio. My mother said he was a financial advisor. Then she said he was helping with insurance. Then one week she called him a family consultant. Whatever she called him, he always left with papers under his arm and the same tight-lipped smile. One afternoon in January, I came home early from the library. The roads were bad and my shift got cut. I came through the side door quietly, the way you do when the house is cold and you just want to get upstairs without conversation. And then I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. She said once she signs it, the whole thing is ours to manage. Dale said, and if she asks questions. My mother laughed. It was a short, dry sound. She said, Riley does not ask questions. She never has. I stood in the mudroom with my boots on and my heartbeat in my ears. I heard paper shuffling. I gave it 3 seconds and then I opened the side door loud, called out that I was home, and walked into the kitchen making noise. The table was clear. My mother was smiling. Dale was leaning against the counter. She handed me a mug of hot chocolate and said, "Cold out there, huh?" I said, "Yeah." On the edge of the counter, just barely visible under her cardigan she had tossed down, I could see the corner of a document. The letterhead read, Holloway and Partners, Family Wealth Management, York, Pennsylvania. I took my hot chocolate upstairs. I sat on my bed, and I made a decision. That was the night I stopped being the daughter who did not know. I just did not tell anyone I had crossed over. That Friday, I took the shoebox out. I walked to the park 3 blocks from our house, sat on a bench in the cold, and I opened my grandfather's letter. He wrote in his careful, even handwriting. He said, Riley, if you are reading this, then something is wrong at home, and I am not there to help you fix it. I suspected for a long time that your mother sees your inheritance as a family asset and not as yours alone. I never wanted to poison your view of her, but I could not leave you without a way to protect yourself. Gerald Whitmore is my attorney. He has been for 22 years. He knows everything. Call him. You have rights. You have options. Use them. I love you more than I have ever found the words for. Grandpa Raymond, below the letter, in block letters, a phone number with a Lancaster area code. I called from the park bench with cold hands and a clear head. A woman answered and said, Whitmore Estate Law, this is Sandra. I said my name. She went quiet for a moment and then said, Hold on, sweetheart. A man's voice came on. Warm, unhurried. He said, Riley, this is Gerald Whitmore. Your grandfather told me you might call. I am glad you did. Can you come to Lancaster? Tell your mother it is a college financial aid appointment. I said yes. His office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on King Street. Tall bookshelves, a desk lamp throwing warm light, the smell of old paper, and good coffee. He stood up when I walked in. Late 60s, silver hair, a jacket that looked like it had been through a few presidential administrations. He pulled out a legal pad and walked me through everything slowly. He drew diagrams. He wrote down terms, irrevocable trust, beneficial interest, fiduciary duty, spendthrift clause. He said, at midnight on your 18th birthday, those assets are legally and fully yours. You have 3 options. Keep the current structure. Dissolve it. Or move everything into a new trust you design right now, today, before anyone can pressure you. I said, what do you recommend? He said, a new irrevocable trust with a professional corporate trustee. You would be the sole beneficiary. Distributions would cover education, housing, medical, and living expenses. Your mother, Dale Pruitt, and Cody Pruitt would be excluded permanently as beneficiaries or trustees. Once you sign, no one can undo it. Not even you. That is the point. It protects you even from yourself in a weak moment. I thought about my mother's smile, her closer to your birthday. Her Riley does not ask questions. She never has. I said, let's do it. He nodded slowly. Then he said, There is one more thing I need to tell you about the man your mother has been meeting with. I said, tell me. He folded his hands and said, his name is Kenneth Holloway. He is a local estate attorney. He has been formally censured by the Pennsylvania Bar twice. He specializes in what our profession calls aggressive family wealth consolidation. He was my grandfather's word for it. What it actually means is that he drafts documents most attorneys would refuse to touch. Gerald opened a folder and slid it across the desk. I could read the top of the first page upside down. It said Callahan Family Financial Alignment Agreement. My full legal name was in the subheader. Riley Ann Callahan. He said, a former paralegal at Holloway's firm left recently and forwarded draft copies of this document to 2 colleagues out of concern. We received one. I said, what does it do? He said, it would make you a co-trustee alongside your mother. It grants her durable financial power of attorney over your assets, and it transfers a significant share of your beneficial interest to a holding company. Something called Pruitt-Callahan Capital Group, LLC. I looked at the signature line. It was dated February 15th, 2 months before my birthday. While I was still 17 years old, I said, she would have had to sign alongside me. He said, correct. As your legal guardian, she could have countersigned while you were still a minor. That was the plan. Get you to sign before the trust releases while she still has parental authority over your name. I set the folder down. My hands were perfectly steady. I was surprised by that. I said, how long has this been in the works? He said, based on the draft version number in the footer, at least 4 months. I did the math quietly. 4 months. I had been pouring her coffee and setting the dinner table and saying goodnight every evening for 4 months while she was building a legal cage around my future. I said, let's build mine instead. I drove home at the speed limit with both hands on the wheel. My mother was in the kitchen making her Sunday pot roast, which she only made when something big was coming. She turned and smiled and asked how the financial aid meeting went. I said, really well, actually. She handed me a plate without being asked. She said, I have been thinking about your birthday, Riles. Maybe we do a family breakfast. Just us. Pancakes. We can talk about some grown-up things now that you are almost 18. I said, that sounds really nice, Mom. Dale's voice came in from the living room. He said without turning around, yeah, grown-up stuff. Good idea. I sat at the kitchen island and ate my pot roast. It tasted exactly like it always had. I kept my face clean. Gerald had told me, do not change a single thing. Not your expression, not your schedule, not one word. I did not. I was exactly the daughter they thought they had raised. I just also happened to have an attorney. We met 2 more times before my birthday. Always with a cover story. A campus tour. A scholarship interview. A library study session. Gerald was patient and methodical. He talked about money like it was plumbing. Not magic, not morality. Just systems. We named the new trust together. He asked what I wanted to call it. I said, the Raymond Trust. He wrote it down. He did not ask why. We built it piece by piece. Corporate trustee out of a firm in Harrisburg with a clean 40-year record. Sole beneficiary Riley Ann Callahan and her direct biological descendants in perpetuity. Permanently excluded from beneficiary or trustee status. Carol Callahan Pruitt, Dale Pruitt, Cody Pruitt, and any business entity in which any of the 3 held equity. Distributions authorized for tuition, housing, medical expenses, and reasonable living costs. Spendthrift clause. No creditor could attach. No one could pressure me into a lump sum withdrawal. Irrevocable, no amendment, no reversal, no exceptions. Gerald said, this protects you from them. It also protects you from yourself. 5 years from now, if your mother cries the right tears, you cannot undo this. That is on purpose. I said, I know. He said, good. Most people your age do not. We set the live execution for midnight on April 17th. Notary ready, trustee ready, online platform ready. Gerald scheduled a call for 9 a.m. sharp the morning after. My dad's sister, Aunt Denise, called me out of the blue the week after that last meeting. She lived in Columbus, Ohio. She was a pediatric nurse, 51, no nonsense, in the best possible way. She said, I heard you have been talking to Gerald Whitmore. I said, he told you. She said, he told me you called. He did not tell me what about. I can guess. She said, Riley, I should have told you this a long time ago, and I am sorry I did not. Your father tried to set up a trust for you 6 months before the accident. He wanted me as co-trustee. He had already talked to Gerald about it. I sat down on the porch steps. I said, "What happened?" She said, "Your mother." She cried for a week straight. Said it was a betrayal. Said it meant he did not trust her. He gave in. Left everything to her directly. Life insurance, the house savings, everything. I said $300,000. She said, "You found the paperwork." I said, "Last month," a long quiet. Then she said, "Honey, you are not the first person she did this to. You are just the one whose grandfather made sure you had a door to walk through." I did not cry. I wanted to. I said, "Aunt Denise, if I need somewhere to go after my birthday." She said, "I have a guest room, a very opinionated cat named Biscuit, and a full coffee maker. You come whenever you are ready and you stay as long as you need." 3 days before my birthday, my mother organized a surprise dinner at the Willow Creek Country Club in our town. 15 people. Pastor Jim and his wife. Dale's business partner. 2 neighbors. My mother's garden club president. Cody in a button-down that was one size too small. My mother stood up during dessert, tapped her wine glass, and said she wanted to toast her brave girl, who was about to make some very smart decisions. 15 glasses went up. I lifted mine. I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Mom." Across the room at a corner table, a man sat alone eating a Caesar salad. Mid-50s, expensive watch, leather portfolio leaning against his chair leg. He looked up once at Dale. Dale gave him a small nod. I did not know his face yet, but I knew what that briefcase meant. Kenneth Holloway was already at my birthday dinner. One night early, waiting April 17th, 11:48 p.m. My bedroom door was locked. I was in pajamas. 3 sharpened pencils on my desk that I did not end up needing. I wanted to sign as the version of myself who had lived in this house, slept in this room, eaten at that kitchen table every morning for 7 years. At 11:52, Gerald joined the video call. Silver hair, blue tie, his desk lamp glowing green behind him. At 11:54, a woman from the trustee firm joined. Her name was Vanessa Okafor. She said, "Happy almost birthday, Miss Callahan." At 11:56, the online notary joined, camera on. ID verified 11:59. Gerald said, "Ready?" I said, "Yes, 12 in 1 second. I typed my full legal name into the signature field, Riley Ann Callahan. Slow. Each letter deliberate. The notary confirmed. Vanessa confirmed. Gerald's eyes tracked the screen without blinking. At 12:03, Vanessa said, "Initiating transfer." At 12:04, she said, "Confirmed. Funds received. $712,640. The Raymond Trust is fully funded and legally irrevocable." Gerald looked into the camera and said, "Happy birthday, Miss Callahan." I had been holding my breath for almost 90 seconds. I let it out slowly. I said, "Thank you." He said, "Get some sleep." "I will call at 9 downstairs," the refrigerator hummed. I closed the laptop. I sat in the quiet for a while. Then I lay down, and for the first time in months, I slept like someone who had nothing left to be afraid of. Before I tell you about the morning, if anyone has ever put a document in front of you and told you to just sign it, drop the word "ready" in the comments. I want to know how many of us are in this room. I read every single comment, because what happened at that breakfast table was not a confrontation. It was a moment I had been building toward for 5 months without making a single sound. 7:45 a.m., April 18th. I showered, dried my hair, put on a pale blue cardigan and jeans and my grandmother's small gold earrings. I looked in the mirror and said out loud, "Quiet daughter." Then I went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like pancakes and bacon. My mother was at the stove in her Saturday robe. She turned and said, "There is my birthday girl." She hugged me 3 seconds longer than she normally did. Dale was at the table in a polo shirt, looking like a man trying to appear relaxed. Cody was scrolling his phone, and there, to the right of my mother's placemat, sat a manila folder. Not hidden, not even tucked. Just sitting there in the morning light like it belonged, my mother lit 3 candles on a stack of pancakes. She told me to make a wish. I leaned forward and I thought, I wish Grandpa knows. Then I blew them out. She let me eat exactly 2 bites before she folded her hands on the table and used her warm women's circle voice. She said, "Honey, now that you are 18, there are some things we want to talk about regarding Grandpa's money." I set my fork down. I said, "Okay, She slid the folder across the table. It came to rest against my plate. She said, "It is nothing complicated. Just some family paperwork our attorney put together to help us all manage things smartly." Dale said, "Just structure. Nothing crazy." I said, "Can I read it first?" I opened the folder. The cover page read Callahan Family Financial Alignment Agreement. Riley Ann Callahan, Principal. Below that, in smaller print, Carol Callahan Pruitt, Successor Co-Trustee. Dale R. Pruitt, Attorney in Fact. I turned to page 2, Durable Financial Power of Attorney granted to Carol Callahan Pruitt. Page 5, Assignment of Partial Beneficial Interest to Pruitt Callahan Capital Group, LLC. Page 7, Co-Trustee Designation. Page 9, Acknowledgement of Family Financial Priorities, including educational assistance for Cody James Pruitt. I kept my face perfectly still. I checked the footer on page 1. Generated December 9th. 4 months ago. 4 months and 3 versions of this document. While I was making dinner and doing laundry and saying goodnight and acting like I had no idea, at the 2-minute mark, my mother's smile started to show its seams. At 4 minutes, she tapped her coffee mug twice. At 5 minutes, Dale said, "Riley, sweetheart, you do not need to read every single line." I said, "I like to understand what I am signing." He said, "My guy can walk you through it. Just sign the sticky tabbed pages." I said, "Dale, a second ago you said our attorney. Now it is my guy." He said, "What?" I said, "Which is it?" A silence fell over the table like something dropped from a height. I turned to page 5 and tapped the paragraph. I said, "Mom, this line assigns partial beneficial interest to Pruitt Callahan Capital Group, LLC." "What is that?" she said. "Oh, just a family holding structure for tax purposes. Nothing significant." I said, "When was it formed?" She said she could not remember exactly. Dale cut in. "Riley, stop overthinking. Sign the tabbed pages and eat your pancakes." I looked at him, level and calm. I said, "Dale, how long have you known Kenneth Holloway?" The name landed like a stone in still water. Dale's jaw moved, but no sound came out. My mother said, "Too fast, sweetheart. We never mentioned our attorney's name to you." I said, "I know. That is exactly what I am noticing." Cody looked up from his phone for the first time. I turned to the last page and read the footer out loud. Generated December 9th. Holloway and Partners. Document version 3.4. I said, "Mom, this document has 4 months and 4 versions of planning in it." "That is not a template. That has my middle name in it." She said, "Riley." I said, "One more thing. I would like our family attorney on the phone before I sign anything, just to explain it to me." I said the word "our" gently. I watched it hit her. Her smile cracked at the hinge. She said, "We do not need Gerald for this. Our guy is right outside and can explain everything." I waited 3 seconds. I said, "Mom, I never told you who our family attorney was." The kitchen went completely silent. The kind of silence that fills a room when the heat clicks off and no one has spoken in a full minute. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She said, "Grandpa mentioned him once, years ago. I must have remembered the name." I said, "Grandpa has been gone for 14 months. I have never said Gerald Whitmore's name in this house. Not once." Dale stood halfway up. Cody said quietly, "Wait, who is Whitmore?" Dale said, "Cody, go upstairs." My mother reached for the table edge with both hands. Her knuckles were white. She said, "I made some inquiries when your grandfather passed, about the estate. It is not what you are making it sound like." I said, "When did you make those inquiries?" She did not answer. I said, "Was it around the same time you and Dale started meeting with Kenneth Holloway every Wednesday at 4:30? Dale said, "You little." He stopped himself. His face had gone dark. A vein appeared at his temple. He said, "Do you have any idea what we have given up for you?" I said, "Dale, you moved into this house when I was 13. My phone was face up next to my plate. It lit up at exactly 9:03 a.m. The name on the screen said Gerald Whitmore, Esquire. My mother's face lost every bit of color it had. I looked at her. I looked at Dale. I looked at Cody. I said, "Do you mind if I put him on speaker?" Dale said, "Do not answer that." I said, "I think I will." I hit the green button. I hit speaker. I set the phone on the table between the folder and the maple syrup. I said, "Mr. Whitmore, you are on speaker." I am at the kitchen table with my mother, Dale Pruitt, and my stepbrother, Cody. His voice filled the kitchen. Steady and calm and completely unhurried. He said, "Good morning, Riley. Happy birthday." I hope I am not interrupting breakfast. I said, we were just starting a conversation about money. He said, good timing then. He paused. I wanted to formally confirm something for the record. The asset transfer we discussed was completed successfully at 12:04 this morning. The Raymond Trust is fully funded. The trustee is Harrisburg Fiduciary Partners. The transaction is legally irrevocable. The sound in that kitchen was not a sound. It was the absence of one. My mother's fork dropped onto her plate. Dale's hands curled into fists on the table. Cody said, "What?" Gerald continued. Total funded amount, $712,640. Your fall tuition disbursement for Penn State is pre-approved. Everything is in order, Dale said. What trust? His voice came out strangled and thin. Gerald said, the Raymond Trust, Mr. Pruitt, named for Riley's late grandfather. Established last night midnight. My mother said, Riley, you did not. I said, Mom, I did. Dale stood all the way up. Gerald said, Mr. Pruitt, I would advise you not to finish whatever sentence you are forming. You will want to be careful about what is said on an open line this morning. Dale did not sit down. He did not speak either. I watched my mother's face cycle through 4 expressions in about 3 seconds. Disbelief, calculation, fear, and then, slowly and unmistakably, the expression I had been waiting my entire life to see. The expression that said she had lost. Gerald said, while I have everyone together, I want to flag something. Approximately 9 weeks ago, my office received forwarded copies of draft documents originating from Holloway and Partners in York. A former paralegal raised concerns about the content. Standard whistleblower channel. My mother said, that is protected material. Gerald said, work product prepared on behalf of a third-party minor beneficiary is not privileged in the way you may be thinking. And the forwarding is not the issue. The content is, he said, the document is titled Callahan Family Financial Alignment Agreement. It is addressed to my client Riley, with a signature line dated February 15th, 2 months before Riley's 18th birthday, while she was still legally a minor in the state of Pennsylvania. He paused. Riley, can you describe what is in front of you? I said, a manila folder containing a document called the Callahan Family Financial Alignment Agreement. 12 pages, generated December 9th, letterhead Holloway and Partners, version 3.4. He said, that is the document. I want to be clear about 3 things for the record. 1. This document is not enforceable. After midnight last night, the assets it attempts to direct no longer exist in a form Riley can assign. They belong to the Raymond Trust. 2. The document was designed to be executed while Riley was still a minor. The signature line was dated February 15th. Execution would have required Carol Callahan Pruitt's co-signature as legal guardian. That is not an accident. It is a structural indicator of intent. 3. In Pennsylvania, a guardian owes a fiduciary duty to a minor child. Attempting to redirect a minor's inheritance into an entity in which the guardian holds personal financial interest, specifically Pruitt Callahan Capital Group LLC, formed October of last year with Dale Pruitt as sole member, constitutes a breach of that duty. My mother said, stop. Please, Gerald said. As of Monday, I have filed a formal complaint with the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board regarding Kenneth Holloway's role in preparing this document and its 3 prior drafts. Mr. Holloway has 2 existing reprimands on his record. He was notified yesterday afternoon. I expect he is not taking calls today. Dale said, you filed on Holloway. His voice was barely recognizable. Gerald said, Monday morning. Yes, the folder on the table looked smaller now. Just paper. Just dead paper. I said, Mom, look at me. She raised her eyes slowly. I said, did you know what he was drafting? She said, Quinn. I said, yes or no? She said, yes. I knew. Cody made a sound I had never heard from him. Dale slammed his palm flat on the table. The orange juice pitcher jumped. He said, you did all of this behind our backs. I said, Dale, I did it in front of a licensed attorney at 12:01 in the morning on my 18th birthday under full legal capacity. You did yours behind my back for 4 months while I was still 17. Gerald said from the speaker, Mr. Pruitt, this conversation is being documented on my end for my client's protection. I would strongly suggest taking a seat. Dale sat down hard. He stared at the wall. I said, Mr. Whitmore, can I read something for the record? He said, please. I opened the folder to page 9. I read aloud. Acknowledgement of family financial priorities, including educational assistance for Cody James Pruitt at Penn State, York. I looked up. I said, so the whole plan was to use my money to pay for Cody's school. No one said no. No one said yes. I closed the folder. I said, I will be keeping this. My attorney needs a copy. My mother tried one more time. She used the voice she used when she wanted to be forgiven before she had been held accountable. She said, Riley, after everything I have sacrificed for you, this is how you thank me. I let the wave pass. I said, Mom, I have been thinking about the word sacrifice for a long time. I want to talk about it with you eventually. With a counselor in the room, someone neutral. She said, I do not need a stranger telling me how to be your mother. I said, I think we both do. I think we have for a long time. Gerald said, Riley, your Aunt Denise is parked at the end of the driveway. She called me 20 minutes ago. You are welcome to leave whenever you are ready. I stood up. I picked up the folder. I picked up my phone. I said, thank you for breakfast, Mom. I walked to the coat rack. I put on my jacket. I stepped into my shoes. I walked down the hallway. At the front door, I paused and turned. Cody was watching me. Just Cody. My mother had her face in her hands. Dale was staring at his coffee like it had betrayed him too. I said, Cody, you are 17. You did not do this. Do not carry it. Text me when you are 18 and on your own. He nodded once. I opened the door. The April morning was pale and wide and honest. I walked down the driveway. Aunt Denise's Subaru was idling at the curb with the heat running. I got in. She did not say anything. She just put the car in drive. If you just unclenched your jaw, tap the like button right now. Because I thought that was the end. I genuinely did. I thought walking out that door was the last chapter. It was not. It was barely the middle. I did not know yet what was about to happen to Dale's business, to my mother's mortgage, to Kenneth Holloway's law license, or to the small town of Willow Creek when 15 people who had been at that country club dinner started comparing notes. I did not know yet what Cody would text me 8 months later, or what my mother would eventually admit to a family counselor in a fluorescent-lit office off Route 30. The next chapter is the one that surprised even me. And it starts with the morning the tow truck showed up at Dale's shop. Stay with me. I will have that story linked right below this video. You are not dramatic. You are paying attention. And you have been for a long time.